When I saw one of my doctors in July, she mentioned that I needed to have some blood work done before I came back for my appointment in October. And she said that she would have her office call me the next day to schedule. And they did, the very next day. But I didn't answer and they left a voicemail, which meant that it was now on me to call them back and schedule my blood work. And did I mention that this was in July? And as of time of recording, we are now in October. And I am happy to report, probably in part due to me researching and writing this episode, that I have given them a call back and scheduled my blood work. I did it yesterday because my appointment is next week. And if you are an ADHD mom who feels resistance to tasks, from brushing your teeth and taking a shower to paying your taxes and making doctor's appointments, there is a very good chance that you are experiencing what is known as demand avoidance. So let's take a little time today to discuss what demand avoidance is, how it differs from procrastination, and some strategies that you might want to put in place to help you reduce the friction you have to starting tasks. All of that on today's episode of the ADHD Mompreneur. And a brief introduction for those of you who aren't new to the ADHD Mompreneur. My name is Christy Lingo. I'm an executive function and accountability coach for ADHD mom business owners, helping them to understand and own their ADHD while creating coping strategies for them to juggle raising a family and running a business. To learn more about my coaching services, stop by my website at theadhdmompreneur.com. While you're there, pick up my free essential checklists for ADHD mompreneurs to help you know and remember all the steps for those regular activities you do as a business owner. So be sure to stop by the ADHDmompreneur.com today to check out my coaching services and pick up your free essential checklists. So what is demand avoidance? Because neuroscience is advancing so quickly and there's constantly new terminology thrown at us, it can become difficult to distinguish what is a diagnosis, what is a symptom, or what is simply just a behavior. I wanted to start by defining some of the terminology that you may run across as we discuss or you research demand avoidance. You may have come across the term pathological demand avoidance, or PDA, which is typically linked to an autism diagnosis, and it involves the uncontrollable and intense urge to avoid everyday responsibilities. PDA is rooted in the need to have control over a situation or a demand. I actually read an article from a therapist who specializes in autism who prefers to call PDA a persistent drive for autonomy, which is a great way to differentiate it from the demand avoidance typically experienced by many ADHDers, which is rooted in the idea of resisting perceived responsibilities and demands. An ADHDer's demand avoidance is less about asserting autonomy or control over a situation and more about not wanting to do what we think we are supposed to do. The demand avoidance symptoms that we experience are likely related to positively balanced cognitive avoidance or avoiding external expectations due to executive function challenges, as opposed to a drive for control or autonomy in a situation. The positively balanced cognitive avoidance cycle looks something like deciding to avoid a task and then giving yourself positive reinforcement for making that choice by saying things like, I can just do it later, or I'm doing something else that's important instead. And when you continually give yourself these positive messages in relation to avoiding a task, you are building up positive rewards and neural pathways in your brain to encourage you to not do the thing in the future. When it comes to demand avoidance and executive functions, we might struggle to start a task because of the executive functions of planning and organization. We may avoid tasks that appear stress-inducing or because of a fear of failure due to the executive function of emotional regulation. We may steer clear of commitments that look like they may overload our overworked brains due to struggles with the executive function of focus. Even things like struggling to take a shower or change your clothes or brush your teeth can be seen as a demand avoidance symptom due to the executive functions of motivation and task initiation. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, I feel like demand avoidance just sounds like procrastination. And you're not wrong. They do sound very similar. But it is important to distinguish the difference between the two because the strategies that you put in place to overcome them might be slightly different based on what you're experiencing. Procrastination is task specific and typically shows up due to low motivation or interest in that specific task or project. Demand avoidance is a persistent pattern of avoiding demands or requests in general, whether those requests are coming from yourself or from others. Procrastination often happens when you just aren't interested in doing something, so you make a conscious choice to do something else. Demand avoidance often happens when you actually want to do something, but feel a deep-seated internal need to resist. Procrastination typically stems from a lack of motivation, making it easier for you to say no to tasks that aren't piquing your interest. And demand avoidance typically stems from emotional dysregulation and a sensitivity to stress, making it easier for you to say no in order to avoid those negative feelings. And whether we are experiencing procrastination or demand avoidance isn't an either-or situation for us ADHDers. There are days that we might struggle with lack of interest and procrastination, and there are other days when we may struggle with fear of failure and demand avoidance. Which is why it's important to have a whole toolbox full of coping strategies when it comes to managing your life as an ADHD mom business owner. If you'd like to learn more about overcoming procrastination, you can check out my episode on ADHD and procrastination that I have linked in the show notes. And to wrap up our discussion today, let's go over some of the strategies I have for you to help with demand avoidance. And let me start by saying undoing habits and implementing new behaviors can take time. And I know from my own personal experience as someone with ADHD that we struggle when we aren't seeing immediate results. Which is why my first tip for overcoming demand avoidance is to recognize and celebrate those times when you are able to get your executive function up and going and do the thing that you've been avoiding. Celebrating these small victories creates and reinforces positive neural pathways in your brain, making it easier for you to motivate yourself in the future. Your brain will be like, hey, I remember how good it feels when we do these things. I want to have that feeling again. Let's do it. Next, try reframing demands as choices. Making a subtle shift in the way that you talk to yourself about a task or project that you feel like you need to do or that you have to do can be an important factor in getting yourself to actually do the thing. Instead of thinking, I have to pay bills, look at your to-do list and think, I need to pay bills, wash dishes, and send an email to my kid's teacher. Which one do I want to do right now? Or if you are like me and the parent of a child with ADHD that struggles with demand avoidance, instead of saying something like, you need to work on your homework when you get home from school, present it as a choice by saying, would you like to work on your homework right after school or after your soccer practice? You're giving them a choice of when the action will happen, but you're not letting them decide if the action will happen. With time and practice, you may be able to reduce your resistance to, I have a certain task that needs to be done at a certain time by presenting it as, I have a list of tasks here. Which one do I want to start with? Or which one piques my interest today? And if you are still struggling with reframing, you could try if-then strategies. In general, an if-then strategy involves making a deal with yourself. If I do or feel X, then I will Y. If I am resisting paying bills, then I will at least pay the one that is due soon. If I am resisting folding laundry, then I will turn on my favorite podcast and work on folding for at least one episode. Knowing there is a hard out or an end point can be helpful for task initiation hurdles because A, your brain recognizes that there is a stopping point and it's not going to go on forever. And B, you know that you're going to get that sweet, sweet dopamine reward when the portion of the task that you're working on is finished. In a similar vein, a technique that I call DIFFIT can also be helpful against demand avoidance. DIF is an acronym that stands for Do It for 5 minutes. And just like the acronym suggests, you set a timer for 5 minutes and you do whatever task it is that you don't want to do for those 5 minutes. Sometimes you'll get the ball rolling and you'll find a flow and you'll keep going. Other times you may go for 5 minutes and decide, that's it, I'm done, I'm not working on this anymore. But at least you've made some progress, and some progress is better than no progress. And finally, it's important to reduce your overall anxiety if you are looking to overcome persistent demand avoidance. The cycle of demand avoidance is often triggered by the anxiety we feel about the task at hand. Maybe we have put the task off for so long that it feels like it will take forever, or we are embarrassed that we waited so long to do it. Or maybe we feel so overwhelmed by all of the things piling up that we just want to curl up under a blanket and avoid doing anything. This avoidance can lead to the positively balanced cognitive avoidance that we discussed earlier, because avoiding the tasks gives you short-term relief, only to have the task rear its ugly little head again down the road and start the anxiety cycle all over again. And if you are an anxious person by nature, this cycle will only compound those anxious feelings. Which is why finding ways to reduce your anxiety in other areas of your life can mean that you still have a little bit left in the tank to help you get over your motivational hurdles and start a task that you really don't feel like doing. Things like getting enough sleep, eating a balanced diet, getting regular movement or exercise, and developing mindful practices like meditation, breath work, or journaling can go a long way in reducing your anxiety and benefit your overall life and outlook. And as somebody who struggles with anxiety, I know what it's like to think, well, easy for you to say, just reduce your anxiety. But the good thing is, there really isn't a downside to things like getting more sleep, eating healthy, exercising, or incorporating mindfulness practices into your day. So even if you don't see immediate results in terms of your demand avoidance, you will still feel benefits in other areas of your life. And with that, we wrap up today's episode. I'm curious if you are someone who struggles with demand avoidance, or maybe you didn't even realize that there was a terminology for what you were experiencing. Or maybe you even have a strategy that you put in place that works for you when you're struggling to start a task that you would like to share. Be sure to leave any questions or tips that you have in the comments below. And while you are down there, hit the like, follow, or subscribe button so you won't miss any of my upcoming episodes, like next time when we're going to talk about self-care practices to help you avoid burnout. This is going to be especially important as we head into the busy holiday season. So until then, keep making your ADHD journey part of your success story. If you're a business owning mom with ADHD, you're going to need to grab my free customizable essential checklists for ADHD mompreneurs by visiting bit.ly/checklists for ADHD mompreneurs, or by following the link in the episode description. Do it now before you forget. Until next time.